Oh, boy.
Oh, here we are. We got a long story today, so I'm not long introductions. Tom, go ahead and tell us the story.
All right. Well, after these things, Jesus showed himself to the disciples for a third time by the Sea of Tiberias. He showed himself in this way. Gathered together there were Simon Peter, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, Thomas, who's called the twin, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of the disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." And they said to him, "All right, we'll go with you." So they went out and got in the boat and fished all night long and caught nothing. And just after dawn, Jesus stood on the beach. But the disciples didn't know that it was Jesus. And he said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" And they called back, "No." He said, "Throw your nets on the other side and you'll find some." So they did. They threw the nets on the other side. And now there were so many fish that they couldn't haul in the net. And the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Simon Peter, "Ha! It's the Lord." Well, when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put his clothes back on because he was fishing naked and jumped into the sea. And the other disciples came, dragging the net full of fish, because they weren't very far from shore, only about 100 yards off. When they got to the shore, they saw Jesus sitting by a charcoal fire with fish and bread on it. And he said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you caught." So Simon Peter went on board and he hauled the whole net full of fish onto the shore, 153 big fish. And even though there were so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now, none of them dared to ask him who he was, because they all knew that it was the Lord. So Jesus gave them some of the fish and also in the same way, the bread. Now, this was the third time that Jesus had appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Well, after breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And Simon Peter said, "Oh, yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." And then he said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Simon Peter said, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Tend my sheep." And then he said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was deeply grieved that he asked him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, I tell you, when you were young, you girded yourself and you went wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, another will gird you and will take you where you do not want to go. Now he said this in order to foretell by what death he was to glorify God. And then he said to him, follow me.
Wow.
It's the story.
That's a powerful story. Thank you, Tom. It's interesting in that story, there's it begins with a certain vocation and ends with a different vocation. So it starts with the disciples all going fishing, and then Jesus talks to Peter about caring for sheep, so being a shepherd. Talk to us a little bit about these two different vocations, what meaning they might have for this story.
Well, fishing was an economically central part of life in Galilee. And so there were a whole series of ways in which it was embedded in the economy of that whole region around the Sea of Galilee, based on fishing. And, you know, fishing was, relatively speaking, fun. You know, we're out on the water. They were, to some degree, economically independent. They weren't rich by any means, but they weren't poor, dirt poor. They were part of the peasant economy. Shepherding, on the other hand, was the lowest of the vocations. The rabbis, I think it was Yohanan ben Zakkai, said at one point, there are three things that you will not teach your son to become: a doctor, a butcher, or a shepherd. So all of those were things that made people unclean. And shepherding was, I don't know, it was the pits in relation to a vocation, though there were lots of young men who did that.
Yeah. Okay, so Peter, beginning the story, Peter says, I'm going fishing. And the other disciples say, well, we'll go with you. And the story names 7 disciples. What's the significance of that, if any?
Well, I think it is that he names the disciples for whom there was a story earlier in the gospel. So Nathaniel is one of the first ones to be called. He's the one who is astounded that Jesus saw him under the fig tree and has a complete change of mind. And
Jesus said, is it because you saw me under a fig tree?
Yeah.
You call me Messiah. Yeah.
Right.
It's a great line.
Yeah. So I think it's a playful story, as is this one.
I had it wrong. He says, "It's because I said I saw you under the fig tree." There we
Right.
go. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, we need to get the story straight.
Yeah.
So then Thomas, the twin, there's just been the story about him looking for evidence of the resurrection. The sons of Zebedee, they are part of the first call of the disciples. They had been disciples of John the Baptist, and so they go over to being disciples of Jesus at John's recommendation. So they're the ones who are known and about whom there has been a story told. And I think that's what they were the ones who the disciple who's telling me this story, he knew some stories about them.
Okay. All right. So they are fishing, and they're fishing by casting nets, and they're fishing all night. What would that have been like? Then they don't catch anything.
Well, it was hard work. They would work at night because it was cooler. You know, it's often hot on the Sea of Galilee. And so they would fish at night. It was also that they would tend to catch more. You know, they'd let down the nets and make a kind of wall. And then they'd sometimes they'd light torches and get on the other side and try to scare the fish into the net. So this is 7 guys on a boat in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, fishing all night, taking up the nets, putting them down. And with all that work, they caught nothing. Total frustration.
Yeah. So then this person appears on the beach at daybreak and says, "Cast your net on the other side." And
Right.
and they do. And then they get this huge number of fish. And at that point, John recognizes Jesus.
Now, the disciple whom Jesus loved.
Ah, okay. Okay. Not named.
It's
All right.
it's not necessarily John.
Okay. Peter responds by,
But it does seem that this story is the story that is told by the disciple whom Jesus loved. So there's a kind of autograph in this of his sharing his experience and naming himself as a part of this.
you mean John? You mean John? You mean the whole God?
No, I mean the disciple whom Jesus loved. He remains nameless.
Okay.
He is the disciple whom Jesus loved.
Okay. That's who he is. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So Peter then gets all excited when he realizes it's the Lord, and jumps in, and it says that he was fishing naked. Is that likely? I mean, is that what they did, or did he just strip down to his underwear? Or not that I don't know that matters a whole lot, but you know, when you're trying to visualize things, you want to visualize them right, although I'm not sure I want to visualize him naked jumping in the water, but that's okay. Anyway, talk about that a little bit. What do we think it would have been?
Well, Mark uses this same term, gumnos, to describe the young man who is seized at Jesus' arrest. And first, that story is, you know, he had only a linen cloth over his nakedness. And when they seized him, he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. So the implication of that use of the word there is that he was totally naked, that he left everything in order to get away.
Yeah.
The implication in this is that he was naked. There's been there's been a lot of speculation about that. We finally don't know. But I think the implication of the word is that he was naked, and this was a sign of his masculinity. And that, these were strong, vigorous young men.
Yeah, but you know what I think might be most significant about it is just the degree of detail, which we get. We're going to get that with this detail about there were 153 fish. So it just seems like when you have that kind of detail, somebody is remembering it quite
Yes.
accurately. It lends credibility to the story.
Right.
And that leads me to the question is kind of with regard to this whole story, does it seem likely that this could have happened?
Well, at some level, the answer is no. It is incredible what happens. But it's hard to imagine somebody making this up.
Yeah.
And so it's a distinctive story. It's only present in John. It's a delightful story that sounds like a story that young men would tell to each other about their experience. And so something happened that generated this story. And there is enough detail that clearly it was shaped by a storyteller who delighted in this story and in its in the particulars of what happened, including the 153 big fish.
Right. Is that a lot of fish? I mean, was that unusual?
That's a lot of fish.
It's a big breakfast.
Yeah. Well, I looked into it. The probability is that they were tilapia. That was the dominant fish in the Sea of Galilee. Huh. And so if they were big tilapia, they would be, like 5-6 pounds each fish. Well, 153 times, times 5 is over 500 pounds. That's a big net to haul in for Peter to grab and pull in 153 big fish, each of them weighing, a minimum of 3 pounds, and probably more.
Another sign of his strength and his masculinity.
That's right.
Right, which he's clearly going to need.
He hauled the whole net and full of fish onto the shore.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because the way the story ends, and we'll get there in a minute, is sort of in contrast with this picture of him as being so, strong and virile and everything. And he's going to end up being girded and taken where he doesn't want to go. So, but before we get to there, let's move to the conversation that Jesus has with Peter. It's very interesting, and you told it in a way that lent a great deal of meaning to it that you wouldn't get if it was just read sort of flat. It'd be very strange. These 3 repetitions that Jesus asks him, "Do you love me?" And the 3 times Peter said, "Yes, I do."
Right.
So what is going on there? I mean, I think you conveyed it in your telling, but let's spell it out for folks. And also just why you need to say it differently.
Right. Well, it is a characteristic of biblical storytelling that when there are repetitions, they are not just to go over the same thing. So I've heard this story read, Simon Peter, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said, feed my sheep, and so on. Repeating that 3 times in the same way, becomes utterly boring.
Well, and meaningless.
The purpose of repetitions in biblical storytelling is to create emphasis. And there's always a difference between a first telling and a second telling, of repetition, in order to emphasize whatever it is that is going on in the story. And there are a lot of repetitions in biblical storytelling. So this is one of those instances where there is a creation of emphasis, and in this case of testing. it's like Jesus is examining him at a trial. And
so is there a particular reference to the 3 times, and why does Peter grieve after the third question?
well, the reference for anybody who's listened to the whole story is to this Jesus predicting that Simon Peter would deny him 3 times before the cock crowed. And that's what happens. And he goes out and weeps. So again, there is this motif of his recognition of his failure, and it brings him to tears.
Well, the first time Jesus asked that is, do you love me more than these? And I kind of wonder what the referent is for these. Is it the other disciples? Is it the fish? Is it the lifestyle you've got? I almost wondered now when you said that if it's referring to, I mean, Peter's the one who denied Jesus. The others ran away. But Peter, having said he would never deny him, he'd fight to the death for him, whatever, did deny him. So maybe that's in contrast to the other disciples. I don't know. But anyway, what do you think the these is when Jesus says, do you love me more than these?
It is an ambiguous antecedent. So it clearly is in the 7 disciples, the other 6, more than these other men who are sitting around the fire. But it also is a reference to these fish, this way of life, this beautiful place, the Sea of Galilee. So he is calling him and questioning whether he loves Jesus more than this whole thing. So there's no way to exclude that whole range of meanings, given that it's an ambiguous antecedent.
And then Jesus says that he would no longer gird up himself, but somebody else would do that and take him where he didn't want to go. What is all that about? What does girding have to do with? And where would he be taken? Sounds like a prophecy.
Yes. Well, girding was tucking men wore loose clothing, and so they would tuck it into at their waist so that their thighs, so that they didn't get caught in the robes. It is not like a jock strap to gird up the testicles of a man, and it is often translated fasten a belt around. So that's probably a more a translation that makes more sense to people because they don't know what gird refers to.
Mm-hmm. And being taken where you don't want to go. That sounds rather ominous.
Yes, that is that he would be crucified. It's a prophecy of Peter's being crucified as he was. And that this time, the first time that he had a chance to stand strong, he ran away or he denied him and escaped this. And so this is then saying, this is going to happen to you. This is part of what it means to follow me. So know it ahead of time and don't deny me again.
And he gives him another chance, the second chance to follow him.
Right.
He wasn't going to. He was going to go back to his old lifestyle fishing.
Right.
But here he says, "Follow me." So it's a powerful ending to that story. Yeah. Any last thoughts about how this story might relate to ministries of justice and peace today, or issues of justice and peace
right.
today?
Well, it is the same impact for potential disciples now as it was then. It is likely to be costly. And so know ahead of time that if you become a disciple of Jesus and follow him in the way of justice, that it's likely that you'll experience some marginalization and the possibility of persecution and even of death. So ministries of peace and justice are risky and are not, I don't know, popular.
Right.
So you're not going to make a lot of money. You may experience persecution just as Peter did. So the implications of this is that this is a story for everyone who identifies with Peter. And that's everybody. That's the invitation of the story, is to enter into Simon Peter's experience.
All right. Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone who's watching and spending this time with these stories from the Gospel of John. Have a good week.
This is a wonderful story. And blessings and peace.